announcement. Where's my chat?
Oh my gosh!
Can you see it?
I've got my action bar at the bottom, but I'm looking for the chat.
Your action.
Crying out loud! For crying out loud, in the words of.
You want me to read it real quick?
Would you mind? I don't know what's going on here. All right, go. Thank you, Melissa. All right.
Okay, this meeting may involve the remote participation by members, either by telephone or other electronic means, due to the local public health emergency, novel coronavirus pandemic, pursuant to the provisions of Minnesota statutes, section 13D.021.
Thank you very much, Millicent. Hello, all, and welcome. It is the March meeting of the Program and Policies Subcommittee of the Minneapolis Pedestrian Advisory Committee. I am co-chair Peter Vader, here with co-chair Julia Curran, and I see a full screen, a lot of people here. Millicent is recording, taking note of who is here, as per usual. Is that right?
That's correct.
All right, thank you. We got a good agenda between here and 6 o'clock, so I'm going to kick it off right away. We're going to talk about processes internal to the PAC. Then Abigail's here to talk about an upcoming annual report to TPW. We have member appointment information. The application and selection and appointment process is underway. Chris Kartheiser will talk about that with us, and then we'll talk about the looming, believed potential return to in-person meetings for PAC and subcommittees. That'll be the end of the last topic. So first off, we have we're going to run through processes internal to the PAC. I sent out a couple of notices earlier this in the last week to talk about this kind of the subcategories we have there. I've sent in a simple bullet by bullet subtopic item in PowerPoint format that I was expecting to see on screen. If is that available to put up, or I'll share it out myself.
Peter, you can share it yourself unless you'd like us to control it, or if you're having trouble, I'm happy to pull it up.
Give me 1 second. I should have it available momentarily. The share tray is available to me, so there shouldn't be any problem in there. All right. All right, 1 more second.
Mm-hmm.
And cometh. I'm sorry, I'd have to go through a permissions thing, it looks like now, to restart it, the whole thing. So would you mind bringing it up in whatever form? I sent a, I guess it's a PowerPoint version.
Yeah, no
Thanks,
problem.
yes. Sorry for the delay, everybody.
No worries, I'll pull it up right now.
There we go. I can see it. I can see it. I assume everyone else can as well. This is our main topic: PAC internal processes, which are defined as things that aren't outward facing. That is, so much of our work is directed to the city council, to public works, etc. These are things that we take up internally that support that work, involving new members and their orientation and and all sorts of things like that. So we have one other extra handout we'll get to in a minute on the engineering checklist. But we can go to the next slide, and we'll pick. Well, the first one I have listed, are the first two, is the recruiting and onboarding components. We're in a application period right now, and over the year to year, we take it up around in the spring to invite new applications, and around late spring they are. This is a staff-led, bike and ped coordinator-led process where so people are chosen, new members are chosen, and new members are submitted to City Council for approval and appointment. Our role in this would be, we talked about a previous P&Ps, how we go about inviting people to, letting people know that the application period is open, and how we might bring the word to maybe underserved, underrepresented people, communities, and sets of people who might be interested, able, and want to get involved. That's that topic. Julia?
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to add or invite any
I would, it's one that I think paying attention to how it works from year to year is helpful, because just for seeing what works, what doesn't work, what we might think about trying in the future, building relationships, all that.
So as we talk about these topics today, we'd like to get people's, so we're recruiting and onboarding. The next one is involved, get people's, hope people have had some thoughts on both members of longer standing and new members in particular about what the onboarding process has meant to them. So for instance, if I feel like I felt welcome and invited right away, but it's like, what were gaps? I might say, things like, or what we had to, the terminology, technical terms, the jargon and acronyms, initialisms, things like that. And that's a recurring topic under onboarding. What are some of the other things that we think are could be improved, or I guess we could even say what we liked about it and could maybe expand on. And I'd certainly stop here and go around on both of those topics on recruiting and onboarding.
And to throw out there too,
Julia?
I thought I heard somebody else. I'm sorry, I thought I heard someone else speaking up and I didn't want to interrupt. Just to add that, though, some of those processes have changed, with not being in person. And there's also, I know Peter was mentioning things that maybe we could be doing better, but also if there's things that have worked, that's helpful to know too. So that we don't, if there's things that might be specific to a person who doesn't stay on the pack, we can be learning from that, or if there's things that work for some people but not others, we can get a sense of trying to figure out when to try something or when not to. Buddy systems, glossaries, Peter's check-ins, whatever else, Abigail's phone calls, whatever the things are that might be creating a sense of connection or becoming barriers to joining in.
And actually, I'll just jump in. I very recently got an update that I have yet to send out to the group, but is worth mentioning right here. The clerk's office has put out guidance that our council is going back to in-person, and as of now, the date for return to in-person meetings for the Pedestrian Advisory Committee will be May 1st. So by the time we do onboarding, we can expect to be in the new office building. So something just to keep in mind, the online stuff will be gone unless something changes. So hopefully there's no resurgence of COVID or anything like that that bars that, but that's the plan as of now.
Is there, maybe this is getting into the later agenda item, but are there plans for if there is a resurgence or when there is another variant, like a C2?
I think that's a really good question, and I kind of distracted us from the main point of this,
Okay.
but can we come back at the end?
Sorry.
And
Yes.
no,
Thank
it's
you,
not.
Chris.
No, let's come back to it at the end of this meeting and talk
Thanks.
about it for sure.
And I feel like, thank you, Chris. I appreciate that update. And we'll look forward to getting back to that. I have all sorts of questions. In terms of our onboarding, I'm open to want to hear anybody else's comments at this time. Certainly, we bring up these subjects today as overviews. These are things that we want in mind all the time. So we're not trying. The idea isn't to solve everything today, but to remember that these are things, that these internal processes are something everybody on the PAC is welcome to engage in, suggest, and certainly ask the questions that involve themselves. I come back to the technical terms and acronyms all just from my own experience, and certainly a lot of that happens in camera in our presentations when presenters and planners are a lot of terms get thrown around. Unlike the new hire garbage hauler who picks it up as they go along, that isn't always the best way for our work. So I would, like I said, on the one hand, I'll complete the thought. It's just like I felt super welcome, and just like people, in my own personal onboarding experience, I felt super welcome, super invited, to come engage and participate from minute one of the first meeting. The challenge was feeling facility with the nuts and bolts enough to do so. So that's the thing. Barb, I see your hand up, and another hand besides Barb, and then Austin.
I think Austin was first.
Okay, Austin.
So go ahead.
Austin, go ahead. Thank you, Barb.
Sure. Okay, thank you. Hey, everyone. I think for me, something that could have been beneficial to me with onboarding was getting a better understanding of like where the PAC fits in to just greater municipal government in general. Like, we're appointed by the council, but then what? Like, what do we make recommendations on? What, if any, authority do we have? And then what kind of other committees or groups do we interact with more, like Public Works or other groups? I think that would have been really cool to like see more information based on that. And like, certainly I was able to pick it up, kind of like what Peter said, you kind of learn as you go. But I think it would have been helpful to just lay out the different groups that we interact with and our roles and responsibilities for each group.
Yeah, and maybe if I can just touch on that, that's something we kind of like struggle with the balance of every time, because we have like new folks and returning folks, and I think like in general a refresher is always good for everyone, but I guess I'm wondering if there's maybe like, I don't know, Austin, if you would have any recommendations of like sharing a resource packet as opposed to just kind of talking it over more, because it's a lot of information to throw at like right away at everybody, or maybe we like come back in a few months, or I don't know. That's a good point that you bring up, and just kind of trying to figure out the best way to transfer a bunch of knowledge, whether it's like in that first month onboarding or spaced over time,
that's a good point you bring up too. And I think it's always going to depend on people's learning styles. Some people love to just be thrown in and figure it out. Other people want to read the materials first. I always think whenever you can put something in writing and have some kind of handout, even if it's just a one-pager, that can be really beneficial, because then it's durable. It can go on from member to member. And, if you still want to do your presentation or however we learn the information to begin with, that's always helpful too. But I'm definitely a fan personally of like written documentation that can help people get on board.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, well said, Austin. Thank you. That's we'll notes on that. Barb?
Yeah. I appreciate what Austin said. And when I onboarded, Matthew gave us tons of websites to go to look at different information. I remember feeling slightly overwhelmed, but also it was, you could just keep going back if you wanted to. And the other thing for me is that I just keep, all the initials. I still have to look them up once in a while because there are a lot. In any field, you're going to have lots and lots of idioms and initials and things that if you don't do it every day, you start losing or you forget. So I think reminders about that, or when people do presentations, sharing what that means, or being comfortable just saying, "Can you tell me what that means?" That would be good. I really liked when Peter and I did the calls when we were helping to onboard people. I think it was the last time, it was during the pandemic. And I called, I think it was Matt that I talked to, and I thought that was helpful. And Matt seemed to feel it was too. And I know he's been at a lot of meetings, and I hope that was helpful for him. But it was nice for me to be able to offer that to somebody and just chat with a new member because we didn't get to meet in person. It felt a little bit more connected. I think onboarding while we're in this pandemic has been hard.
Great.
Just to add to that, I know in the past we've talked about having some sort of onboarding packet or doing a living document type thing on a Google Drive that's shared. And there's been a little bit of discussion of like what stuff is official versus, what can be informal versus what needs to be formal and how all that works. Because part of, going back to what you said, Austin, part of what we discuss and struggle with is that we don't have any authority, strangely enough, within the city. And so how do we use the voice that we do have, and how do we let council members or public works staff or whoever know about the urgency of what we're bringing up? So I think that gets tied in because that also shifts a little depending maybe on who's on the PAC and how people are connected within different communities.
Say, speaking of jargon and initials and whatnot, I happened to notice that TPW is now something like LMX or some damn thing.
Right.
What's
It's PWI, Public Works and Infrastructure.
Public Works? Okay. I should have figured that out. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris.
Public. Write that
I guess
down.
that's, here's my can of worms, potentially. So what there's been announced, and this is something, so this is all meta discussion here today. So we'll talk about this for the, for getting the nuts and bolts, it's all open in the future. But I guess the recent announcement that, part of the new power arrangement, the power, how power and authority are divided vis-a-vis mayor and city council. Well, there's been an announcement from the mayor's office that there will be a mayor's cabinet. And I suppose that is something that will bear watching in terms of our, efforts and, talking about as an advisory committee, not an authority, we have but our voices, and just so how we make ourselves visible and vocal to those who are making the decisions, that could potentially, I guess, change in the new environment.
And just a reminder that the different topics listed here are all ones that did not start out under the PNP umbrella. They're ones that were brought forward by PAC members and kind of initiated over time. So things like figuring out more formal or any written documentation for onboarding or getting the glossary going or whatever else we might think about are absolutely feasible and welcome, and part of how we make everything hopefully flow better and better.
Thanks, Julia. And the next up we have we have a one of our internal processes brought about a engineering checklist used one sheet for planning presenters presenting to our infrastructure and engineering committee primarily would use. And is that available to put on screen?
I couldn't find that in our drive. I think that was something maybe you all put together externally, and I sent an email last week. I don't know if you guys saw it, but
this was the thing that you and Matthew pulled together
well,
when we were
well,
having this.
There's one that says like what happens at 0% and what happens at 30%, but then there was also like an actual checklist that like I think Aaron back in the day was like involved in creating, and I couldn't find that. I thought you were talking about that one. If you're talking about the other one, I can pull the 0%, 30% one up. But I thought you were talking about the actual like we look for 10-foot lanes, we look for ADA at every curb, like that specific one. I couldn't find one.
I blanked on that one, so I'm really glad you brought it up because that was I think we were heading really good places with that one. So that's a good one to bring up and revisit, I think. But the one we were talking about was the one that was, just for context, we were noticing presenters coming to us came with really different, it seems like people presenting didn't necessarily know quite what the PAC did or what our expectations would be. And sometimes they'd come in with a presentation that may have been used with a very different audience and looked very deer in the headlights for throwing a car analogy or metaphor in there, with our questions, even though we tend to be fairly, I think we're a little bit predictable in what we're asking for from project to project. So the checklist that Matthew and Chris developed that came out of our conversations was to try to give people coming to the PAC some guidelines about what we'd be, give the presenters like those guidelines of what we'd be looking for or asking or how we function, and then also a heads up in hopes that it would also be more accessible of reminding them to get us documents early for people with just for basic accessibility and all of that.
It even says first line package appreciates pedestrian in the headlights look from the presenters.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and read this and treat it like a resolution since you all don't have it, but so that I think we should just do that for process sake.
Yeah, thanks.
Unfortunately, but Pack and Back Engineering Subcommittee presentation tips. This document provides project managers from the City of Minneapolis and partner agencies with tips regarding the best practices for presenting to the Pack and Back. The purpose of the Pack and Back engineering subcommittees is to review all transportation related capital projects in Minneapolis at 0% and 30%. The project manager may return to the Pack and Back after 30% if there is a major change from what was presented at 30%. Objectives: standardized components that are common to all or most presentations. Frame the discussion for projects at 0% and 30%. Ensure the presentations are accessible to all. Standardized components that are common to all or most presentations. Presenters should come prepared with the following information: design stage, 0 or 30%. Schedule, funding source and amount, location within the city, relevant information regarding project details, if you're seeking a recommendation, and generally what kind of resolution would be useful. Frame the discussion for projects at 0% and 30%. Projects at 0% should focus on the following: general overview, rationale for the project, scope limits. Projects at 30% should focus on the following: provide context such as bicycle, pedestrian, auto volumes, speed limit, speed study results, transit presence, nearby destinations, crash data, etc. Discuss the layout. Pack and Back members should bring up specific design concerns such as dimensions, signage, signalization, maintenance, etc. Pack and Back members may decide to formally comment on the project through a resolution. And then the final piece is ensure that presentations are accessible and understandable to all. Presenters should meet accessibility needs of Pack and Back members by ensuring that all digital materials are ADA accessible. Presenters should try to send handouts and presentation materials to committee staff in advance so that they can relay the information to the Pack and Back in advance. This is especially helpful to members that use accessibility tools or devices.
Second.
Mhm.
That's
Thanks.
good.
Thanks, Chris.
Yep.
This would be another part of that meta discussion where we're always looking to improve and make it relevant to the presentations as they happen or as they evolve, or if there's something that's more relevant to the to consultant type or park board type or non-Minneapolis Central Public Works Transportation Planning presenters. Those are kind of things that would be helpful too. These are
And most recently, I believe, we're folding in. I forget exactly how we did it, but we were talking with Chris about making sure that included in that information was the PAC's climate resolution. And
right.
if I'm remembering correctly. But I believe that was part of emails going out. I'm seeing Barb and somebody else has a hand raised.
I don't.
Okay.
All right. Next on that list is that Glossary of Terms, which is a work in progress as part of a shared Google Doc. And with an attempt to provide some background to the basic definitions to acronyms, initialisms, commonly used terms. I'm still not sure what a windrow is or a one-earth. So that's kind of to have a helpful living document of these terms and things that come up. Not to be necessarily a legal or policy authority for such terms, but to give some at least some context for new and existing members.
So if I could just speak to that, this is Austin. I think going back to the document that we just looked at, suggestions for presenters, I think it's really smart for presenters to not speak in acronyms as much as they possibly can, or if they're going to, maybe introduce what the acronym means at the beginning of the presentation. I'll just say from like my experience, whenever I gave presentations that were complicated government acronym type presentations, just always best practice was to spell it out beforehand. And I understand we can get kind of like caught up in the moment, or we just, are so used to saying the acronym that we might not even know what the acronym means anymore. But if anything, like, yeah, we could create a glossary of terms for new PAC members. That certainly would be helpful. But I would also recommend like presenters try to spell out the acronym in their presentation to assume the audience knows nothing, because sometimes they come in with very limited knowledge.
Yeah, that's super fair, and I think that's a pretty basic request, I guess. Across when you have these multidisciplinary people speaking to lay groups, essentially lay groups, that's real important.
I put it in the presentation guide, just so you know. I think that's a good one, Austin.
All right.
Yeah. Thanks for doing that.
Thanks.
I appreciate that.
Thanks. Yeah. That document is needed some tidying up, and a link will be out to it following this meeting. And I certainly invite anyone's participation for its improvement. I've paid attention to it. Past members have. Julia Kern has. Christopher Hoffer has. So it's anybody. It'll be a simple spreadsheet form to add and edit as you should be pretty self-explanatory. Next up, Julia and I developed this send out monthly emails prior to the to this subcommittee meeting to introduce our agenda, to give people members a zero-click look at the agenda, as LIMS has automated it. It's a click through from the email notice, and it doesn't. So anyway, we thought we'd take the agenda from the LIMS link, put it in an email form so we get a quick look at it without clicking through further, and have a little idea of the context of the topics to the extent we understand them. I don't know what we're asking at this point, because I'm sure I want to know if people find them useful. We might try to duplicate it, replicate it for other monthly. Might be suitable for other monthly PAC meetings. But that's the idea there. That came up in the last year as the LIMS notices became automated without a lot of extra information. I also find the LIMS links frequently, I never know what I'm going to get. Even just starting the meeting tonight, if the server didn't respond, then 10 minutes ago it did come up. So it's kind of another hope to improve on on that performance as well. We're going to talk about timeline awareness too. Let's talk about throughout there is a somewhere between casually and formally, there's an annual schedule of things that come up that will come before us every year. Capital Improvement Program resolution or CIP every year. Julia, will you talk some more about this particular topic, the timeline attention?
Yeah, this one is just that we've had, Matthew as staff and Sean before him, and but it's still only part of their job. So there's been definitely times in the past where all of a sudden the CIP is coming up and we're kind of struggling to find time to explain it or to figure out what we need to do to have good resolutions. And the timeline piece is just, nothing's been written out yet, but it's at least an awareness of around this time, we've got new member recruiting, and there's some things that become easier if we keep them in mind ahead, since some agendas can get fairly packed fairly quickly and from forces outside of what we do, depending on who needs to present. So just being aware for leaner months, where we've got this coming up in 2 or 3 months that we want to do. We've got Abigail or whoever the chair is presenting to PWI. That's the basic gist of it, since there are recurring things and some of them shift and some of them have, when we haven't been quite as on top of it, it's either been a struggle to get something that is up to the standards that we'd like, or we might be passing by probably the standards. I don't know if we've actually missed out on much, but we definitely have ended up under more pressure, more stress, or with not everybody as able to participate as fully because we haven't had as much time ahead. So.
Mm-hmm. The recruiting and onboarding is certainly a regular, that would be a part of that regular calendar too.
Mm-hmm. And then there's the annual walk. That's in September. We don't have so much that it necessarily needs to be written down, but also it's not held in any formal place. So it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to be getting it down in a place we can all access or something.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that's something that PAC could build on its own, or is that are we ask staff to make us aware of that calendar, or build that calendar, or see?
I think we could do it in a matter of a minute or two. I think we've been really good on the CIP the last couple of years. We've kind of changed that process since when I started in the last 4 years. There's definitely what Julia has said has happened, where we've been under time constraints. Now we typically start that in September.
Mhm.
Also the pack walk is then, which is something good to keep on the radar because there's I don't know exactly what the transition will look like with the new bike ped coordinator and when they come in and how long I'll be around, but a lot of this stuff I think makes sense to write down in some way or just like have formalized, because I'll need to say that to whoever's new so that they have all these things on their agenda for the year annually when they come in. So yeah, I'm happy to. I don't think it would take too long to work up a calendar of and I think Julia hit on pretty much every annual thing. But we can spend a little more, or I can spend some time thinking if I missed.
There's something that I think we don't have full clarity on, that maybe more from PAC perspective than from incoming staff. But I know that I've heard Abigail talk about sort of the budget, and I've also heard that from some other non-PAC places, is like, when is the budget compared to, I don't remember the details, but I feel like there's some confusion, because we have sometimes shown up to speak around pedestrian issues for when the budget gets set, and that definitely we've had, I think, meeting conflicts or close to conflicts where luckily we've been in the same building.
Like when the mayor and council like actually formally adopt the budget for a given year. Yeah, so that's basically like we pass our resolution usually in like January or February of that year. Then it goes to click in April. And then at the end of that calendar year is when it's actually formally adopted. So that could be something else to note if that's something you all kind of annually have a presence at or something.
Mm-hmm. Would that be something to work on and get to you, or will you work on it and have us take a look and add things that might be missing, or what's the best way of helping out with incoming staff?
The incoming staff, like that'll be me in terms of transferring all that information, and then obviously in meetings, like you'll develop a relationship with whoever that is and talk through all this stuff. But I can take care of kind of onboarding that person from a formal perspective.
Right. I think finally here we here's another internal process that we've spent some effort on in the last couple of cycles, and that is on the nature of our resolution writing, and a lot of that effort came out of the INE side. The chair is there, Barb in particular, we spent some time discussing what a resolution should have, particularly as it relates to as we're talking about infrastructure plans brought before INE and then the full pack. Barb, not to just pick you on the spot here, but is there just some thoughts on that?
Well, the one reaction that I had is that it has been more of the process of getting it written. Are you talking about what we want in the resolutions, or the process of how we get to them? What do you want?
Yeah, certainly. I guess I was thinking first, what we have arrived at to make sure that are in our resolutions, and the rest.
Well, I think that the one thing, and Julia brought this up earlier, is to make sure that, and maybe this happens in a meeting and not in the resolution, but we always refer to it as the climate emergency. I think it's important that as we discuss the issues that we have with particular projects, that information, that crisis is front and center in how we respond to certain elements of design or the lack of elements of design in a particular project. Usually, my sense is usually we say what we like about the presentation, and then we are clear in 3 or 4 sentences or a list of the things that we have concerns about. And some we've been, there's been a couple projects like the Bryant Avenue project where we pretty much fully supported that. There were a couple of things that people had issues with the distance to bus stops and a couple other things, but they were fairly minor, and generally the whole pack supported that. That makes it a lot easier to write a resolution.
Yes.
And I'm not thinking of specifics other than how we support it, what elements of it we support, especially highlighting the ones that we think are as critically important, and then a clear list of the things that we're concerned about and why. Not just, we don't like this, but this is why, and this is the element that we always taking into consideration the issues that present themselves with the city's carbon footprint and the crisis in the climate right now.
Right.
Is that what you wanted? Is that helpful?
Yeah.
Or what?
Yeah, I think it describes our process pretty well as I understand it. So sort of open, want to hear from everybody else. I know, Christopher's always pitching in, Christopher Hopper's pitching in on resolutions. He has absented himself, as he told us, that's right. But also Julia, Abigail, and I, Austin's been pitching in, and it's, I feel like we got a good, I just give my own thought is that, I feel like we're in a good spot right now. Like, month to month, we have really, I think, between the people, among the people who write, we get good, not, I would say, not opposing, not divergent, but, certainly fresh points of view from everybody that resulted in strong, clear resolutions, I think. And we're always looking to improve that, and also hope people feel free, everyone, to pitch in with their rewrites, with their edits, with their just even their, even to the point of a thought or even a wish for projects or resolutions. Those are all welcome from everyone to whatever degree that people are comfortable participating, small or large. And Neil as well. Yeah, Neil.
And I know Harmony was in on the last couple of resolutions we did too.
Oh, right.
So that was good too. The other thing I would say is that I look forward to when we meet in person, because what used to happen, especially in the I&E, is we would stay a little longer and work on that resolution if we had one or two resolutions together for 10 minutes or 15 minutes. We'd start putting things together during the meeting. And that was really fun too, because it felt personally more collaborative, even though it is collaborative when we send them an email and go back and forth.
Yes.
I thought that was really fun. And so I really look forward to that.
I as well.
Yeah.
I know for myself coming onto the PAC, the first time I was asked to write a resolution, and I really had no clue where to start or if this was something I was supposed to know how to do. That was an intimidating point for me. So I appreciate that we've moved more towards collaborative, and it feels like we're pretty open about, I'm hoping people are feeling comfortable if they're jumping in early meetings or not sure what's going on, feeling like they don't need to know what's going on to participate, that it's collaborative enough that the willingness is what we're looking for.
Input is always appreciated. I agree, Julia.
Yeah.
And I know over time we've played around with different things, or there's been discussion of having like really formalized order of segments of resolutions, of how succinct we keep them, what order to put what kind of framing, what kind of language, as well as do we cite past resolutions? And that seems like something we might also want to consider. I don't know how LIMS has affected I know it's been getting updated, but I don't know if it is now easier to find past resolutions than it had been if we ever need to cite them.
I don't know.
Good.
And then coordinating with the back when there's projects that we want to make sure we're not in conflict in our positions on.
Right. Yep. And occasionally they've done all the work for us. We can just do what they said. So.
Bless their hearts.
Or did it first anyway. Well, that's great, everybody. And pending any final comments, I'd like to close the topic. So after, so we can move on with the next major parts of our agenda. Thanks everybody for participating in this section of it. It's a lot. I'm always super comfortable with the meta parts of things, but this is real. But it's just something we can keep open our minds, as Julie explained to me. So we want to open people's minds to these topics so that they're always around. So thank you. Not seeing any hands or hearing any phone voices, I'm going to move it to the next P&P agenda item, which is our Abigail Johnson with the annual report to PWI, right? But formerly TPW.
Yes, thank you, Peter. Yes, so this was on the agenda. Yes, and TPW is now called PWI, which is Public Works and Infrastructure, and that is a subcommittee of City Council. And out of the, I think, Chris, let me know if I'm wrong, out of the 7 members that are on that subcommittee, 6 are new City Council members or something like that.
I don't know off the top of my head, but that sounds right. Yeah, because I think Andrew Johnson was the only one that was previously on TPW, I think.
Yeah.
And he's now the chair.
Okay. Yeah, so I just wanted to just kind of highlight that. So for those of you who are newer, I'll just kind of give a history quickly of how we usually present our annual report and what's been happening in the last few years. And then our goals for this year, as well as some things that have come up, including the in-person component, as well as kind of the framework that Alyssa, the chair of the Bicycle Advisory Committee, and I have already kind of put together. So in previous years, probably up until maybe 2 or 3 years ago, it was very much an annual report, like, hey, these are all the things that we talked about in the last year, and here's some good highlights and high fives. And like, we hope that things get better and better. And then over the last few years, it kind of has been a little bit more like, hey, we love these big policies you're coming out with. We can't wait to see for engineering to like catch up with that. Up until last year, when I think Alyssa and I made a very bold statement, if you want to see it, it's on YouTube for the city, a bold statement about just like your practices don't match your policies. We keep saying the same thing over and over. There's a climate deadline, there's a transportation action plan deadline. Your policies and your action plans seem wonderful, but then in practice, like everything gets watered down. And that kind of was our message. And our thoughts were that, you know, with this year that we could probably say something similar, but given that so many city council members are going to be new, we are thinking we'll have to take a slightly different tack. And so one of our goals is to kind of, I'll tell you about what that kind of direction is. And so usually the pack and the back, they don't have to present together, but usually we do. In the last several years we just have a joint presentation because our goals are similar, you know, safer streets for everyone, including people who drive. And so first and foremost is that this presentation is going to happen to City Council on April 21st. And as it stands right now, that has to be in person. And I am not in person in Minneapolis, and I'm not going to be back until after April 21st. And so I've written to the PAC exec committee regarding the fact that like I can't personally give the presentation, as well as if meetings go back in person, I also can't be present at the last 2 PAC meetings before we do a change of the exec committee in July. So the first thing is that I need to just talk to PAC leadership about who would be willing and able, like physically able to go, comfortable to go to City Hall, give the presentation. It probably is during the work day, so that also kind of puts a wrench in maybe some people's plans. And then 2, of course, Chris will make sure everybody gets the information so that people can also attend. Usually out of the PAC in the back and anybody else, we always have the highest turnout because we're an awesome group of people. So it's always nice if you can be in the room to kind of make that statement by being in the room, if you feel safe.
And Abigail, can I just jump in on that point real quick?
Yes.
they're still figuring out what in-person attendance looks like for non-presenters and regular attendees. So I'll make sure everybody has the information. The overflow room, which is the room we used to meet in, what is it, 319 or something like that, might be something, and then you watch it on TV and are still like on site and we can hang out afterwards. But I'll give all the updates to that when we have it.
Okay, great. Okay, as usual, the clerk's office has half of their things worked out, and none of the info gets to us in time. But anyway, so yeah, I do want to run through the framework that Alyssa and I've put together and get PAC feedback, because I think it's really important that we work together to have, like, I want you guys to know what I was hoping to say, but also that, like, usually I just basically take the things that I keep hearing, recurring themes, you know, and kind of put it together. So I do want to do that, but I was hoping, first off, if we could discuss, out of the people here who are in PAC leadership roles, if any of them are, one, willing and able to physically be present on April 21st, and then two, comfortable with presenting to City Council with the Bicycle Advisory Committee chair.
And maybe one more addition, also being available beforehand to talk with Alyssa, the BAC chair, at least once, and give like a run through to myself and Kathleen, my boss.
Yeah, we have a run through scheduled, and once the person is decided who wants to be involved, the level of involvement, besides obviously a run through or two and some practice time and talking with Alyssa at least once, your level of involvement in the depths of the presentation is also then up to you. So if you have the, you know, whatever your interest lies, you know, we can expand from basically giving the presentation and doing the run through once.
All right. So
Go ahead, Raina.
I'm unavailable on the 21st right now. I'm hoping that my schedule will open up, but I think given what my work day is looking like that day, I don't want to commit to doing this in case it doesn't. But I will happily, I'd love to attend if possible.
Awesome. Thank you, Raina. No, that's helpful to know. Appreciated. Next, so yeah, it's I was just going through the list because technically, I guess in the rules, so it'd be Raina and then Neil, but I don't know if Neil, you'd be interested presenting.
Oh, I'll be there. No, I could present. But if I present, I'm damned if I'm reading my own presentation. I'm assuming I'll be using yours as a script and just reading it off.
That's what I heard too, Neil. That's how I heard it.
Right, which would be fine.
Yeah. So that's good. We have one volunteer. Does anybody else have any interest in?
I too choose Neil Baxter.
I'll don my acting cap and get.
And my attendance is 50-50. I have to travel that day. It might be later in the day. It might not, but I'll make every effort. I love being there. It's one of my favorite days of the year has been since I've been a member. So thank you, Neil, for piping up too. Anybody else want to? Go ahead, Abigail. If you want to jump in.
Oh yeah, and so is anyone else available or fully interested? I want to make sure that if anybody else on the PAC leadership has like a high desire, that we kind of all know, and then we can kind of just choose who can do it from there.
Well, I'm thrilled that Neil said he would do it. I mean, I wouldn't have a problem.
So
I wouldn't have a problem stepping in if nobody would, but it would not be number one on my list. But I would do it if I had to. Yeah. Because I would do what he said. I would read what you wrote and I might expand, but you know, I get worked up and I don't want to get worked up.
Yeah, of course, I never do. My problem will be not slipping into, ancient and venerable Anglo-Saxon vocabulary.
But I would do my best to be there in attendance, whether I were in the next room or whatever, cheering you on, Neil.
There you go. That'll give me all the lovey-dovey I need.
Okay.
No,
I'd second what Barb says. I definitely, Neil, I feel like I'm remembering you have an oratory history around Minneapolis, and I don't know if we've Ty's been in the audience for it before, so I am excited by that. I should be available, but I'm keeping an eye on rates, and as I guess Chris will also be updating us on what that might mean. So I would anticipate being there in some form, provided if others are there.
Okay.
So it could be that
Ready
the presenters will be in the room, and then everybody else will be offsite waiting
Mhm.
to play.
Possibly. I mean, maybe they'll let us in. I'll
Okay.
with my P100 if that makes a difference.
And if we have Neil on there, Abigail, you wanted to get in some of the meat or the framework of your presentation today too, right? Is that right? So
Yes, absolutely.
so let's do that.
Okay, great.
If you want.
That would be wonderful. So thank you, Neil, for that. And of course, if Chris will keep us updated. So yeah, if it's in person, I'm happy we have somebody on offer, and we have some backups too, which is wonderful. So I'll make sure that Neil, you and Barb and Julia all have like copies of the presentation. So and then it'll all be finalized by the run through. So we'll make sure to give you that information, and we'll send you emails regarding the run through of the presentation, so you can practice with Alyssa, and Public Works can hear it first and foremost.
Alyssa is in town, right?
Yes, Alyssa is in town. So it will be Alyssa. Okay. So the framework this year will very much be a little bit, Chris will present on what the PAC is and what the BAC and the PAC do. And then kind of just give like a quick introduction, which is typical. So it's kind of the same thing year over year, but this one might be a little more in depth because it is such a new subcommittee. And then our presentation a little bit is, our goal is to introduce ourselves and kind of personalize it. Like why are the committees comprised of the people that they are? What interests us when we're there? We do this work. We're here. We volunteer our time, and it's because we have a personal interest in it because we're out doing it every day, right? We're out walking the streets. We're out biking on the streets. So we kind of want to personalize it in that respect. Like, who is the BAC and the PAC? Like the committee itself, the people on the committee. And then we're going to go into currently, what is our values framework within the city? So one of the goals will just be to talk about the city has all these policies and plans around walking. So they have all these policies, which is like the climate emergency policy, carbon emission reduction. We have Vision Zero. Yeah, we have and all the other ones like that. And then those policies, like the 2040 plan, it's like those are all kind of funneled into the Transportation Action Plan. And those are value frameworked around this idea of like imminent climate collapse. So, you know, we have a small short timeline and a window that all crashes are avoidable. And so we have a Vision Zero policy, and then we have action plans on like getting us to the place where crashes happen less and less frequently on our streets. We want safer streets for everyone, including drivers. We want to reduce vehicle miles traveled. So these are our value frameworks, and our timeline is only getting shorter. The Transportation Action Plan ends in 2028, 2029. Yes, Julia?
Also the equity component, that just around disability and around race and around income in Minneapolis are also huge, and we see that in so many ways.
So basically all these policies are formed by all these value frameworks. So we kind of wanted to like start the presentation by saying these are our policies and these are our values. But currently this is how things roll out in practice. If the Transportation Action Plan is supposed to end in, I think at the latest 2030, or I think it's 10 years exactly, 2030, like the CIP process has already dictated exactly what's happening on our streets up through, at this point, like 2026, 2027, which only leaves like 3 or 4 years for the Transportation Action Plan to like fully come through. And so part of what we want to juxtapose is this idea of, we have all these wonderful policies and we have these action plans, but funneling the money and the time and the energy and the street changes into practice is like, okay, it's wonderful that maybe we've seen a couple of projects that are really like transportation action plan embedded, but that's on like 10 miles of street or less a year. And so we're not seeing enough massive system-wide change. And so, and it really comes down to this juxtaposition of the way that things are working and the processes that are embedded is stemming from a system long ago when there were different priorities. And so part of the problem is we'll never meet our goals, we'll never meet our timelines on the streets, given the way we handle things now. And then you can also just take all of that and throw it out the window, because 6 months out of the year, it doesn't matter how a street is designed when winter comes calling. And then there's like snow everywhere, there's plowing problems, there's freeze thaw cycles, all the things that we talk about in the pack. I hope to have quite a bit of that and use a little bit of Julia's presentation on sidewalks to say, there's no equity in this. There's no way to make this a safe city for people walking. There's like, it doesn't matter how the street is designed when winter messes it up. And that again is a funding issue. And then again, that funnels into like the processes in place. Why can't we figure out how to fund that? And where are the broken pieces of the system? But then we highlight within that a couple of like solution-oriented ideas that we've been working, that, you know, we've come up with. I know the pack we had in our winter resolutions, we had that in our CIP, our last CIP resolution had a really strong program component where it's like, look, the system may not be perfect and hopefully you can change the system. You are city council, but here are some ways to consider making changes. And that also points to the new public works director. You know, this person's going to be in the room, which is usually what happens. And so we'd really like to highlight that that like things can change for the better, but it really has to come down to changes in processes at a high level. And so we're going to highlight those things and kind of give some ideas, but also then just kind of close it on, look, you're all new to city council. You do bear this responsibility. It's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. And so this is a serious matter. And please like understand that it's up to you to make this change. And we have hope that it can be done and things can move into a direction where we'll actually meet our goals if you choose to act on it. So we hope to end in like a kind of hopeful note. And so that's kind of the framework. And again, this will all happen within like 20 minutes. So I hope that was clear enough, because that was really kind of the big umbrella. Alyssa and I are still working out a lot of the details, but I hope to present to the full pack maybe on the agenda for the April meeting, a little more of a filled out presentation with slides, because Alyssa and I are going to be meeting during the week this week. So I see a hand up from Julia. Anybody else can also just raise your hand and I'll call on you.
Just one comment. I'm really appreciating what you're saying. I hope that you'll also link them somehow to last year's presentation, because that one was amazing. You both did such a wonderful job of summarizing things and putting it so clearly. But just a very specific comment is that it isn't just around funding, but it's around the allocation of existing space. That most of our services, I mean, we might have potholes and everything, but even repairing a pothole so that somebody could bike across it is different than making sure it can handle an 18-wheeler. And we do have these surfaces that would last longer if we didn't put cars on them. So the allocation of existing resources as well, and the cost saving. It isn't just about new funding.
That makes sense. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, I'm going to write that down.
And especially with conversations around drainage, like when people hear some of this as adding pavement to spaces, I feel like there's then the false choice of under climate, like, is it stormwater or is it people walking and biking, when that's not the choice if we don't allocate so much for cars.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
See Barb's hand too?
Yeah.
Barb.
I have a question more than a comment, but when I, in INE, what I see a lot is that the engineering, the staff, the people that create the designs and engineer the streets or engineer the projects, a lot of times I see a lot of innovation. There's been a couple that have been really innovative, but I'm wondering the Transportation Action Plan and Vision Zero and things like that, do they go directly to the engineering? This is probably a ridiculous question, but do they go to the engineering staff and the design staff and say, look over this, these are the values, these are the programs or the values we're trying to put forth for the next whatever years? Is it a topic of conversation among those people in the way that it is for us and for the other people, like from Safe Routes to School and stuff? You hear people talking about it, but I don't know that. And that's a question I have. How is that information and that innovation communicated to all the members of design teams and certainly places like Hennepin County or MnDOT? How do we do that? Is it just through the PAC or is there another formal? I don't know if I'm making sense. Is this clear to you, Abby? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think though, maybe Chris, I don't know if you have more knowledge on that.
Well, yeah. So Barb, are you talking about like our city policies, like Complete Streets or Vision Zero and that stuff? Or are you talking about like the resolutions that
No, not
PAC,
the resolutions, but
okay,
the transport, all the values
like
that Abigail
the policies
talked
and
about,
values?
the
Yeah.
policies and values. How are they disseminated to staff and also to Hennepin County? Do they know? Do they get? That's my question.
So, like the Transportation Action Plan, for example, we engaged all different parts of public works. So every division was involved in the creation of that in different working groups and things like that. And same with the street design guide, that went through a heavy vetting process internally. That said, not every single member of Public Works was involved in those groups. We have like 900 people in Public Works. A lot of those are field staff that wouldn't be involved in kind of the day-to-day of that. But as planners, we lead from 0 to 30% in my group. So like to that concept design that you all comment on, and I personally see it as my job to bring those policies into those discussions, and I kind of frame that up. I think a lot of us do that. We all have different ways of doing that, but the street design guide definitely is meant to be like the main starting point for any design decision. Consultants know that. None of our city policies are binding for, say, MnDOT or Hennepin County on their streets, but if they have something coming through Minneapolis, we're typically, if it's in Minneapolis, we're the biggest partner, if not one of the biggest partners or one of several partners. And so we try and bring those through those conversations as well. And there's negotiation. So it does look a little bit different when it's other agencies doing it. And then also like the street design guide is fluid in the sense that we made it, we tried things out and learn from it and can make changes to it. And so it's a little bit of an iterative process of kind of going back to the street design guide to add more detail or add more flexibility depending on kind of what happens. So I don't know if that's a super straightforward answer, but it's definitely meant to be, like those policies are the driving force behind the work that we do.
And it wasn't meant as a criticism, but I do know that occasionally, and not as often as when I first started, we get designs that seem to not take into, and we're bringing that up. I know Julia brings it up sometimes, or other people bring it up, that don't fit with the city's Safe Streets or Vision Zero or the Transportation Action Plan. And so I wondered if there's just some people that are just personally less, it's just a question of how that information is disseminated. It's not a criticism, and making sure that, everyone has access to what the goals are before they create a design. And I think that's sometimes the frustration that we feel at INE, that not everyone brings that awareness into a design. And it's not a blame thing. I just think that's an important part of how we get this moving forward, is that we continue to communicate to people how important these particular policies are, like you're going to do to the council, Abigail. I think that's essential, that and that staff need to feel that as well.
I think that's a really valid point, Barb, and I hope I wasn't coming off as defensive.
Oh, no,
I
no.
think like it is totally your role as the PAC to like remind us of that or let us know when we're not living up to like your perspective on those standards. And so I appreciate that point.
No, I didn't feel you were defensive. I just think we're all human, and people in the design or the engineers have their own value system that they came into this program with, and it's hard to change that unless we just keep bringing it forward and expecting that those goals and those values are met. So that was my point. Thank you.
I really appreciate your point, Barb, and I'm wondering if there's a way, especially seeing how the last few presentations have really started to be like these standalone sort of summaries that are really getting at core issues, if there's a way of sharing these as a signature with, or making sure it's going not just to these city council members, whether or not people actually watch them. This is now, you know, because we're recording them, it's out there. It's something that we could be sharing. I'm wondering if there might be ways of doing that.
Yeah, actually, Alyssa did mention that the presentation slides would be given to everyone on the Bicycle Advisory Committee. And she was thinking that they could go to their council person, especially if their council person is not on PWI. So like it could be that even the council members outside of PWI see this presentation and get the highlights from Bicycle Advisory Committee person or one of us. I know that like everybody's been working to kind of make plans to meet with their council members. So if that happens and this presentation has slides at that point, you know, that could be something that could also be shared. So it could hopefully in that way go there. But I think maybe you're talking about beyond the council to like members of public works and such.
Yeah, that's been something that I've thought a lot about, is that I don't like when sometimes you see public works staff out doing things like literally plowing snow in front of a curb ramp, and it's clearly not malicious, but there's some sort of communication gap happening, and we don't really have, we're never in front of the people who are actually executing the things that really impact, like, can somebody get to a grocery store safely? So whatever we can do to be building those connections and humanizing ourselves and doing that outreach, I'm super interested in, and I really appreciate how Barb brought that up, because like, yeah, what you talked about at the beginning of the presentation of saying who's on the PAC and why are we here, and then making sure it gets to a lot of different audiences, and also communicating that respect that is there for not just the planners, but I mean, all of public works. I am very big fan of things like fresh drinking water, and, you know, even if it's streets that are getting drained, I'll take that over nothing getting drained, you know? So, yeah, just whatever we can do with all the work you're putting in and that Neil will be putting in, and Alyssa and everyone else. Let's use it as much as we can for as many people as we can.
Thanks, Julia. Abigail, for purposes of today, do you have what you need?
Yes, and I realize now too that the last exec committee member, Christopher Hoffer, is not on here, so I'm also going to touch base with him.
Okay.
But I know that he's currently out of town, so
right.
Anyway, but I'm just going to check in with him too if he has any thoughts, or if he has a stronger urge than any of us to present in person, or anything like that. And we'll keep everybody in. We'll all be in touch. And hopefully we'll see a more detailed slide version at the Wednesday meeting.
Okay.
Next week, I guess.
Next week, yeah.
Thanks, Abigail, for that, and everybody's comments, Barb and Julia, etc. Next up is Chris Kartheiser on the agenda with member appointment information.
Yeah, I think this is a quick one. I sent an email, member appointments. The applications are due Friday, April 15th. I think maybe the only other thing I'll add is just for the folks on this call, at least, what I have in my notes is Barb, Paul St. Martin, Abigail and Neil in terms of folks who are on this call, at least from what it looks like, who are up for reappointment. So if that sounds wrong, or if you thought you were up or have any questions or any of that, feel free to reach out. Happy to help with the application process. And yeah,
I'm already in. I
That's
sent
it.
it to you and I sent it to this person. So,
great. I did get yours, Barb. Yeah, thanks for that.
sure.
One other piece to throw out there is that we've also, I don't think it's a regular thing, but we've been starting to try to talk to people as they leave the pack. So throwing that out there is one of our process things with no additional comment.
All right. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Julia. I'm going to move into our final item, which I'm champing at the bit for, the return to in-person meetings discussion. And that's got Julia and my name on it, but it will be enlisting Chris's help a lot here too. To the extent we have any, I hope people have questions or just ideas about returning to in-person. I know I do. There's a lot of, we've got a new building, first of all.
Maybe Peter, unless you want to, maybe I could just restate some of the stuff from before, and then also a couple other things that I didn't even have this information when we talked about putting this on the agenda, so it's fresh off the press.
Oh, terrific.
So yeah, May 1st is, as of now, the date when we're planning to go back in person. We have the large first floor conference rooms, one of those booked for our full meetings. I'm sure many of you haven't been in the new building, but they're like the only rooms on that floor, pretty easy to find. And then Millicent is showing off our future subcommittee room right there.
I don't see it.
She just turned her video on. I don't
Oh,
know
okay. I
if
guess
you
I'm
can
slow.
see hers, but
You can barely see me.
but yeah,
here.
she's reporting live from our future subcommittee room, and that's on the 4th floor of the new office building, which is where our staff sit. That's like in the public section, so you don't need any pass cards or any special access to get up there until 6 o'clock. So this is something we'll have to just watch and make sure it works. At 6 o'clock, the elevators, then you need an ID badge to swipe in. So it shouldn't be an issue for getting in. But if you leave after 6, you can't get back in, which is probably a good thing anyways. So I don't know why you'd want to do that.
It's not critical. It's not critical that I see this, but is anybody else not seeing
I can see it.
I sure am not. Okay, all right.
I can't either.
Can't either. Okay.
Will people if people leave after 6 who need to use the elevator, will they have to have somebody accompany them, or can they leave but just not come back?
The latter. Yeah, you're
okay.
I don't think you need a card to get to the first floor. I think that my guess is hopefully that's against like fire code. I would think you would be able to escape the building. But I can check. I can check on that because I haven't actually tried it. So I'll make sure.
That would be great.
I'll try it tonight when I leave just to see if I
good.
can. Go
There's
down.
also a stairwell, which obviously is not handicap accessible, but can be used for folks who are able to use the stairwell.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we are not creating additional barriers for people who need to use the elevator, where they're like needing to be escorted like kids. That there should be, if you need to slip out and we're going late, it shouldn't be a.
Yep.
I don't know. I just really want to make sure we're not
and
doing that.
We can still use the rooms in City Hall. The new building is nicer from a technology standpoint. It's also more accessible than City Hall in a lot of ways, and from an ADA like accessibility standpoint. So assuming we'll look into what you just brought up, Julia, but assuming that that's not an issue, I think on the whole it'll be an improvement, and there's like some TVs in there and easy to access computer stuff and things like that. So that's the plan for that. I'm assuming the question will come up of masking policy. So I'll have to check on the exact language. Essentially, I don't think we have like the legal right to make our, like for me as staff to say what, like you all have to wear a mask or anything like that. I'm pretty sure it's whatever the city rule is at the time. That said, you know, I mean, like if folks on this call or like folks on the PAC want to set an expectation and just like have that conversation about what people would like to see and what makes people feel comfortable, you know, we're a pretty reasonable group for the most part, and like tend to want to look out for each other. So I think that's a conversation worth having. And Abigail, I don't know if you have something on that, or feel free to switch the subject.
No, Chris, I think that was a great way to put it, because I was speaking with Alyssa, and that is also something that the BAC is doing, is just like this idea of, okay, if we're in person and the rules are what they are for the city, or maybe there are no rules, we can still come up with our own desired ways of acting around each other that can at least just be things that we would do only just to support each other. So if anybody has concerns or thoughts on what they would like to see, yeah, I think now it might be a good time to share them, because we can kind of come up with those guidelines together.
I guess I have two questions, not around that specifically, but well, three. I'm wondering what we know about ventilation within the building. I'm wondering what we know about how this will be modified as new variants appear, or like what the triggers are to potentially return to remote or change the ways people can participate. So at the very least, people who might be more vulnerable or live with people who can still participate without risking safety. And then lastly, I have some accessibility concerns around going back to in-person meetings, knowing that remote meetings have had some benefits for accessibility. So what are we going to do to provide basic accessibility? And those are separate from the ones.
What was the first one again, Julia? I caught
ventilation.
Ventilation. Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know the answer on ventilation. I would be willing to bet a lot of money that it's better than whatever's in City Hall. And it is a LEED certified building. I don't know if that has anything to do. That probably doesn't. That's more about sustainability. But it does have, like, for example, automatic heating that like senses how many people are in the building and things like that. So I would think that it's somewhat.
Is there any?
But I don't know, like the air change rate. I don't know, like some of that stuff that especially we were kind of focused on early in
Yeah,
COVID.
I think it would be. I mean, we're seeing slightly more moves at the national level to care about ventilation of buildings, which seems like a very belated but good step. And I would like to know from building maintenance staff what exactly we're looking at in terms of what that is within the rooms we're in.
I can try and find that out and see what that is. To get to the second point, which is maybe somewhat related, like the ability to change to remote is completely up to the city and not up to this group, and state law dictates our ability to be remote or not, and that is dependent on whether there's an active emergency order or not. So we won't be able to be remote unless there's an active emergency order, which would allow us to change.
If we're in a stage of denial around, like, if we follow the CDC, we're probably unlikely to see an appropriate response to emerging variants of concern.
Yeah, you know, like I obviously I can't guess how we're gonna react or know like how nimble. The one thing I can say is, like, if we have a meeting scheduled, it's very easy for us now to switch to remote, and we know how to do it. I would expect, like last time we took 3 months off at the beginning of COVID because we like didn't know what to do. I think we're much more nimble now. I can't speak for our mayor, who would ultimately be the one deciding if there's an emergency order and when to do that and how to do that, and whether it's going to keep up with CDC or behind CDC or in front of CDC. Like I just
would hard to be behind CDC at this point.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
like
okay.
I'll just say like we've all been through a lot over 2 years dealing with COVID, and I totally appreciate that the uncertainty is hard to deal with, and like I've had my own like things to figure out with return to work, and like when we were trying to do that and what's required and what's not, and so I get it, and I'll always give the information as soon as I have it, and like ultimately, like
Yeah,
you
no, I
get to
appreciate
decide
that.
about your safety, but I do get that it's not a good spot to be put in a place to where like you have to not go to an active meeting to watch out for yourself. Like that would not be a good spot to be in. So
well, the city not like my issue isn't the uncertainty. My issue is the lack of science guiding when we would adjust things. That's the uncertainty is kind of inevitable with a lot of what we're facing. So the other question then about accessibility within this.
Yeah, you want to say a little bit more about like your worries with accessibility?
May I?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Here's one. Hearing accommodations. Yeah, I don't want to I won't expand on this because we're obviously going to wait and see. We're going to see what happens when we get there. But my concern is masks plus, no hearing help is going to be will prevent my participation just pretty flatly. Particularly in a large room. So that's one accessibility slash masks, which I'm totally for and would want people to wear masks more than not wear them. But that's a concern. That's an accessibility or accessibility adjacent matter.
Oh, like specifically while being masked,
Sure,
making it harder to hear someone speaking
That's right.
who's wearing a mask.
Without microphones and PA or whatever. So I don't know. Does the main room have a PA?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think all of these rooms are video conference ready, so I'm definitely willing to look into like whether or not we can mic up the room. I don't know exactly how that works in terms of like PA and mic. I don't think that we'll have the ability to have like every member mic'd. I would. I mean, there's a long shot for that, but I wouldn't expect it.
Millicent had said something about a known technology that accommodates most all hearing aids called a audio loop that like Guthrie uses, and that Millicent, I believe I understood Millicent correctly, that was part of at least the main meeting room that we're talking about for full pack meetings. So I'm interested in seeing how that would work, and that would take. Go ahead.
You mean an audio loop? Can you explain a little bit more? I don't remember really saying anything like that.
No, I won't. Because I'll just be guessing at what I thought I heard you say in previous meetings. I don't want to do that. We'll find out. But it's a basic ADA accommodation that that large auditoriums that people have been using for a long time. And I would not be surprised to find it. I'll put that in the positive. So anyway, that's something we'll see when we get there. And I would like to go around the room. Is it 6 o'clock and get anybody else's comments on that?
I have additional accessibility concerns, which I'm fine waiting on till after everybody else goes, but I do have additional ones.
Oh boy. And it's also 6 o'clock.
Yeah. So, all right. Julia, want to take a minute on that?
Well, I don't want to be
Get 'em on
keeping
the
other
record.
people. Okay, on the record, I have concerns about, we know that, for example, our Phil Aliff was unable to attend some meetings in winter because of lack of reliably cleared sidewalks even coming through downtown. And, there's people who cannot get to downtown as easily. We've heard a lot from disability community, people with physical disabilities throughout the pandemic, that having remote participation in meetings allows for people to be able to be part of these different communities where people have been excluded as a default. So I want to find out what we're going to do to make sure, especially with the Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and especially given the city's complete lack of accessible pedestrian routes for a significant portion of the year, it seems like at the very least, we should have some accommodations so that there can be remote attendance for at least some members. And I
Julia,
imagine that also.
it is state law, so like I don't disagree with you. I think the state law is inflexible and shouldn't apply to this type of committee especially. And also we can't, we don't have the power to make accommodations to allow some people to be remote.
Okay, and then if we're not able to provide those accommodations, I would be curious about how we can allow remote participation for people if they aren't voting. Like, can that happen?
We can look at that. I'll say this. I think it's going to be a big change to go back to in-person. There are options that we potentially have to still like record and have the meeting go out to voting members. I don't know if the city's going to have guidance on whether or not we should or shouldn't be doing that. I don't know if the rooms are all set up to do that. I think many, if not all of them are. Right now I don't want to commit to it, but I appreciate where that's coming from. I don't
mean that, but I mean more like if it's a state law thing, I would be fine having protest attendance, for example. You know, it just, I'm not okay with the lack of accessibility that we're looking at going back to. So it's a simultaneous participation that I am interested in, and that I'm taking us over time, so I'm zipping it. Any additional clarification we can get from the clerk on what we can be doing.
Let's keep it on the radar, because I honestly do appreciate where that's coming from, and as we move back to in-person, we'll know more about what we can and can't do. And
yeah, I just don't want to forget about it,
right?
Because the people impacted aren't the ones who are able to show up. So
thanks for getting that on the record, Julia. Appreciate that a lot, and Chris's response. And so it is 6:04. We're going to adjourn because it's time to. Just thanks again for everybody attending, and welcome again to Sarah Dunlop from MnDOT. We'll do your introduction next time if you want to talk. If you want to say a little about your background next time. So thanks for now, Sarah, and thanks everybody.
Thanks everyone.
Thank
See
you.
you next time.